This short PowerPoint is going to explain to you how the portfolio is actually assembled and all of the components that are included in it and how you actually fill those forms and documents out and how it's put together. In the upper right hand corner of each one of these slides, you'll see a little sound icon, and you'll be able to click on that icon and hear an audio of instructions. You can pause it, you can return to it, utilize it anytime you want, and I will remind you of this in the end. But you want to be sure and save this little PowerPoint, because while you will not be developing your portfolio in completion during this class, it is something that you'll need to refer back to before you get ready to submit it for credit. So you're going to want to save this, because this information will be very valuable to you later on. These next few slides are going to talk about the components that go within the portfolio. We're going to have a cover page, a table of contents, the petition for prior learning assessment, a FERPA waiver, a position description, an employment or a position verification, the experiential learning outline, and an optional non-collegiate training section. And we'll discuss all of these areas within this portfolio development. So the first page that you're going to actually see, if you were to print out your portfolio, you would actually see it printed as a hard copy like a book, and this would be the very first page. It would be the cover page that's on your portfolio. Of course, as I've already stated, it's going to be submitted electronically, but this is still the cover page, and you'll see it's just very simple. You can have the option of inserting a graphic if you want to. It's not going to change your assessment one way or the other if you make the cover page fancy or if you leave it as is, but what you do need to do is include your name and select the date, and it's going to be the date that you're actually submitting it. So you're going to, if you're submitting your portfolio in the spring of 2019, then that's going to be the date that's on there, not the date that you're taking the class, but the actual date or the semester and the year that you are submitting your portfolio. The second page in your portfolio is going to be the table of contents, and you really need to use this as a guide. You'll see all of the sections that are listed in here. You're going to have, the first section is going to be your prior learning assessment section, and there are 2 forms that are going to be in that section. You're going to have your career history. There are going to be 3 separate documents that are going to be included in that section. You have the learning analysis. There are going to be 2 documents included in that section, one of which is going to be the essays. Now, you may have 1 essay in this section. You may have 6 essays in this section, but you will list all of the essays that you have in this table of contents. The next area that you're going to have, this is an optional area, and it is the non-collegiate sponsored training. I'm not going to cover non-collegiate sponsored training in this particular workshop that we're doing here. If non-collegiate is something that you are curious about, you can ask your instructor about that, and your instructor will help you decide whether or not non-collegiate is something that you are qualified for and something that you might pursue. And if you do utilize non-collegiate sponsored training, then this is the section of your portfolio that it will go in. The last is going to be the appendix, and it's going to be where you're going to include your academic transcript, your certificates, and your license. But again, you're going to use this table of contents as a guide to show you exactly what needs to be included in your portfolio. In your portfolio, there are going to be 3 separate documents that actually have to be printed and physically signed and then scanned back into the portfolio. And this is going to be one of them. This is the FERPA waiver. It actually has to be notarized. The reason that you have to have this is because as a student here, you have privacy laws that are protecting you, and we do not violate those privacy laws. So we have to have permission to take your work and let someone else see it or let someone else assess it. So if you want your portfolio to be assessed for credit, then you have to complete a FERPA waiver that relieves the university of liability for exposing your work to a third party, and this FERPA waiver actually has to be notarized. So again, you will print this document out, you will complete it, you will have it physically notarized and signed, and then scan this document back into your portfolio as a PDF. The petition for prior learning assessment is another document that has to be physically printed and signed and scanned. It actually requires notarization as well. you are applying to the university or petitioning the university to award you college credit for your prior learning. And so this is a legal document that has to be submitted. That's why it has to be notarized. It's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to include your name and your address, your student ID number. You're going to list your the title that you have held that is the field of the occupational field that you're applying for credit for. For instance, when I developed my portfolio several years ago, I was a graphic designer, so my position was, graphic designer. I listed how long I had been a graphic designer and the beginning and the ending dates of the experience of when I had worked in that field. There will be an SOC job code title. That is something that we'll cover a little bit later on in this PowerPoint. I'll teach you all about the SOC job code, but once you learn what that is, it will be included on this petition for prior learning assessment. And again, you'll have it notarized. The next document that is going to be included in your portfolio is going to be your learning inventory. And this is going to be a very detailed inventory of both formal and informal learning that you've had. It's going to be your work history, similar to a resume, but it's going to be specific positions that you've held. It's going to be not individual classes that you've taken, but it will include different schools that you've attended, any workshops that you've attended. And you'll notice when you receive this document that there are some specific instructions on the top of it. It's going to say, beginning with what you consider to be your first professional position after high school. So this is very important that it's post-high school. List as many positions as you can, ending with the most current. Include military positions if they are applicable. And then, very important, delete these instructions and unused rows before submitting this assignment. So if you need more rows, add more rows. If you need fewer, then delete them, but only include what you need, and then delete the instructions because those are just specifically for your information. Then on the very bottom of the form, and you'll see this on many of the forms, you'll see BAAS, PLA, and then last name, comma, first name. You need to make that your last name and first name, of course. And so any form that you have that you see that on in the footer, you're going to want to go in and change that and make that, personalize that to your own first and last name. Another form that's going to be included in this section is going to be the position description. Now, there may be multiple jobs that you have that you've worked in this particular field of experience. Maybe you work in a bank, and so you're going to be submitting your portfolio we'll say as a loan officer, but you've actually held a position in the bank in customer service, and maybe you held a position as a teller, and maybe now you've advanced to loan officer, and it's all of these positions that work together in the banking field that have given you the experience that you have. If this is the case, then you might want to present a position description for various positions. If you have only worked in your current job for 1 year, in your current position for 1 year, however, you've worked in the banking industry for 25 years, you certainly want to cover the broad span of the time that you have worked in that entire field of practice. You don't want to just include this one narrow job that you've done, even though all of the experiences have led up to this position that you currently hold. So use your best judgment as to how many position descriptions you need to submit. You are required to submit one, but if more are needed in order for you to fully demonstrate the depth and the breadth of your experience in an area, then that's what you're going to want to do. If you have questions about that, you can definitely ask your instructor, and they'll be able to give you some feedback about whether or not you need to submit more than one. The external verification of experience is going to be the third of the 3 documents that have to be physically printed and signed and then scanned back into your portfolio. This one does not have to be notarized, but again, it does have to be printed and signed with a physical signature. And so the purpose of this form is that you're going to be telling the university that you have this skill set. You're going to be explaining how that you have this set of experiences, whether they're work-related or volunteer-related, and you're going to be asking the university to believe you and to award you credit based on this knowledge that you have. So we're looking for someone who can verify or confirm that you actually possess the skills and that you have the experience that you claim to have. This could be a current supervisor, it could be a former supervisor, it could be a coworker. There are a lot of different people. It doesn't need to be your mama. It doesn't need to be your husband or a family member. It needs to be someone who is who has witnessed you working in that area. If your area of experience is that you are a business owner and therefore you don't have a boss or you don't have a supervisor, then you might find someone who has worked with you in your business. But it needs to be someone who is credible, who can attest to the fact that you actually possess the skills that you claim to have, and that who can attest to the fact that you actually have this level of experience that you have. And again, they will need to print it and sign it. I've been asked several times if the individual has to fill it out, and of course that is ideal, but sometimes that's not always possible. So you can actually type in the information that you know needs to be included yourself, but the individual who is doing the verification, they have to be the one to sign it. And then again, it needs to be scanned back into your portfolio. The next two components of the portfolio are going to be the area that's going to be really important. This is where you're actually going to start developing your portfolio that is going to earn you credit. So this is the experiential learning outline, and later on in the course you will learn exactly in detail how to fill this out. It'll be based on the occupational code that you've chosen and the specific skills that you decide to write about. And so there will be a segment where you actually learn to develop your experiential learning outline. However, just to go over some fine points of it, there are 5 separate domains of knowledge that you will be able to draw from, and I've listed them here in this particular outline. So you have collaboration, you have problem solving, you have time management, leadership, and communication and interpersonal skills. And you'll be able to select which domain of knowledge that you plan to utilize. You'll select your own learning events to write about, and you will also select the skills that you're going to write about. Now, like some of the other documents, I believe it's the learning inventory, you only want to keep the lines that you use. So on this experiential learning outline, if you don't use communication and interpersonal skills as one of your domains of knowledge, you're going to want to delete that off of there. If in collaboration you only use 3 skills and 3 learning events, then you're going to want to delete those extra lines, because you'll see that for each domain of knowledge you have up to 6 skills that you can list within that domain. But we don't want you to send an outline back that has empty spaces in it, and we also don't want you to fill it with skills that you're not actually including in your essay. So you want to make sure that this outline lines up with exactly how you plan to put together your essays. And again, we'll go over this in greater detail in a later module, but just remember that when you start looking at how you're going to put this together to actually submit it for credit, make sure it doesn't have any blank spots in it, and make sure that if it's listed on this outline that you actually included it in your essay. So now we come to the essay portion of your portfolio, and of course this is where the bulk of your time is going to be spent in actually developing these essays. When you begin to develop your essays, you will develop them based on the outline that you've put together, the experiential learning outline, and you will actually be probably going back frequently to the ONET database and reviewing those skills and looking at kind of how you're going to develop this. But once you begin to compile your portfolio and you start putting it all together, you're going to want the order of your essays to follow the order of your experiential outline. So if you've written 3 essays, whatever order you listed them out on your outline, that is the same order that you want to put them in your portfolio, so that they'll actually be in that same order. If you only do one essay, obviously that's a whole lot easier, but depending on how many you write, you want to make sure that you include them in the right order. It is extremely important that you follow the format that you're given. You have access to these documents here, and you'll see that this is actually a template that you're going to develop your portfolio, that you're going to develop your essay around. And this is not a suggestion. This is, in fact, exactly how we expect the essay to be formatted. And part of your assessment is based on whether or not you followed this format. Additionally, it has to be in APA style. One of the things that you're going to find out as you continue on in this course is that there will be some academic sources that are utilized in your essay, and those academic sources have to be cited parenthetically, and they have to be cited using APA style, and you also have to have a reference page. So you want to make sure that you follow APA style exactly, because again, part of your assessment is also going to be based on whether or not you followed APA style and whether or not there were mistakes in that. And you certainly don't want to lose credit because you made the mistake of not following the correct format that was given to you. The final section of your portfolio is going to be the appendix section. And in that appendix section, you can include your transcripts, any certificates that you have, any licenses, or etc. You are actually required to include an academic transcript. It doesn't have to be an official transcript. It can be unofficial, which is something that each of you can print off yourself. By going into your Web for Students, you have access to your unofficial transcripts, and you can print that off. You can save it as a PDF and include it in your portfolio. If certifications or any licenses is part of your experiential learning, and if you've included those in your essays, if you've discussed those in your essays, specifically if you are utilizing the non-collegiate sponsored training, you will for sure have license and certificates if you're doing that. So if you have certificates and if you have licenses that are addressed within your portfolio, then you're going to want to include copies of those certificates and those licenses in this appendix section. Again, it's not required unless you mention them in your essay. If they are relevant to your learning, if they're relevant to the experience that you had, and if they're relevant to the credit that you are applying for, then you're going to want to include those in your portfolio. If they are completely irrelevant to what you're applying for credit for, then it's not necessary. That ends this segment on the portfolio components that you're going to be including, and I really recommend that you save this, save it in a folder and refer back to it, because right now it's not as important to you as it will be once you actually start developing your portfolio. And so I really recommend that you not only save all of the documents that we've provided, but that you save this little PowerPoint so that you can actually go back and listen to it again when you have questions about how you're supposed to complete these documents and how you should be compiling your portfolio.